Welcome back. Today we're going to talk about chapter 2 in our Lead with Love, learning how to love, answering God's call to love well. And I'm excited. I was reading over the chapter, and it's a very unique experience when you are the writer of something to then go back, and I'm kind of a constant editor, so it's hard for me to read it and go, oh, that really went out there in the world. But the gist of the chapter is this idea of how is the image of God in our own minds? How have we imagined him versus, there's all these different ideas of gods. We've got Zeus and we've got Hermes, and we've got these different Greek gods and Roman gods. And how does the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob actually look in our heads? So the big discussion is this. There's 3 main points that I want to hit today. First is the biblical worldview that God is number one. And in Deuteronomy, we have Moses, who created or wrote the Shema, which is a Jewish prayer that is continued to be recited, sometimes twice a day in the Jewish culture. And this is what the Shema says. It says, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your strength. These commandments today are on your heart." That was the Old Testament. And then Jesus, when the Pharisees tried to kind of trick him and say, talk about this prayer, Jesus added to it. So he stated the Shema, which is, "Hear, O Israel, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself." He added the love your neighbor as yourself. So the story that we see come through the movie Switched, and then the story of this book is this idea of how do we keep God first, and then the other things in our life underneath it. So here's what I want to share today. This is what I got out of the chapter in my own study. As I was reading it, I was thinking about what's happening in our world today. It is 2021. It has been a historic year in my lifetime. I've never experienced the kind of, collective political worldwide unrest that we've experienced. A lot of it due to COVID, but I think there was a lot underneath it that just got risen through the COVID experience. And so here's what I realized. I struggle with putting God as number one. And that's my whole takeaway. My whole takeaway is this, that I am always battling with either moving myself or finding an idol or something to put above God. I don't think it's conscious, but I think the subconscious experience I've become aware of it with this. As I was reading this chapter and I was thinking about how I view God and realizing what has happened for me and my vision of what America is, COVID has shattered a lot of my innocence, a lot of the things that I kind of held as my core understanding. And part of that is this. I love things to be predictable, organized. Give me a good planner and I will fill it out and it will look beautiful, right? It makes me feel mastery over my life. It makes me feel like I know where I'm going. And I really like to make plans and budgets, and those things are important. But when I was really evaluating where God fits and do I have God as number one, I realized that some of what has been shaken for me over these last months is that I think some of what I took for granted as the world around me, the culture around me, the predictability that the United States and my life in the United States gave me had become a God, which is why over this last 9 months I felt so unsettled. I felt so uncomfortable. And the reality is, I wish I could say that it feels really good to have made this discovery this week. It doesn't feel really good, because what I'm realizing is that, is God really my foundation? And here are my little examples. Some of the things that I took for granted in the past. driving wherever I wanted, going into a store, doing my job the way I used to do it, without hand sanitizer, without a mask, without any distance. Another thing that I've taken for granted is crossing state lines. When I was a kid and we traveled in Europe, I remember thinking, wow, this is crazy. Like some of the European countries are smaller than states in the United States, and we have to go through a checkpoint. We have to produce our passport. We have to cross that national line. And when I got back to the United States, it's like you can get in your car and you can drive for hours and days and never go through a checkpoint. And part of what has been rattled for me is almost the worry that we will have some checkpoints on state lines. And some of that actually happened with the worry about carrying COVID home or carrying it to your summer home and crossing those boundaries. And I realized that I find a lot of comfort and I put a lot of stock in the way life was. And I would wrestle and fight against that and even make my world become really small by staying home and staying in a small controlled space, rather than do the hard work of saying, God, you are number one. You will protect for me. You will provide for me. You are leading me. Your Holy Spirit is always moving in my being and guiding me. But sometimes these other things go up and over and above who God is and where he's supposed to fit in my life. So for me, that is the wrestle that came out of this chapter. I encourage you to read the chapter. I encourage you to do the 3 activities. And I'm going to post pictures up of mine because I kind of went a little crazy. But the 3 activities, the pixie dust settling is, how is your church influence or your church experience influenced your vision or your ideal of what God looks like? The second question is, what does God look like for you today? Where are you at? And what is your image of God? And then the third is, what does God look like when we paint a picture of him from the Bible? And this is what I want to leave us on. We were created a little higher than the angels, but below God. And when he finished creation, he said humanity was in his image. He had created them in his image, and they were very good. So thinking about that God versus the Zeus with a lightning bolt ready to strike you at all times, how does the picture change when we think about God saying at the end of creation, right before he takes a rest, he takes this breath, he's created the pinnacle of creation, above the angels, below him, and says, man and woman are very good. We are those creations. And I'd love for you just to sit in that, thinking about being God's very good creation. Hey everybody, this is the bonus lesson. This is the non-paper pencil part. I just want to show you what I have been doing in my journal. I take notes when I read the chapter and kind of answer the questions, kind of write what strikes me. And then I had a lot of fun. I used some of the craft stuff that I have, and I just wanted to kind of show you what came out of it. I'll post a picture up, but I'll tell you about it. So here's what I had: some washi tape that sort of had like an antique look of the world, and I put that on there. I put coffee because I had washi tape that said coffee, and I love coffee. And I was thinking about idols. What are those things that I put, that are vying for attention, my attention, and displacing God from his number one spot? And not that I think coffee is bad, because I think God gave us coffee, but that idea of the comfort sometimes that I get from my cup of coffee, what would it look like if I was getting that comfort from God? One of the things that I did this week was I went through my verse cards. I was looking to just be reminded of, this is 40 different verses, all about the love of God. And I was amazed as I read through them. Different ones struck me, and it was just like my gosh, it was better than my cup of coffee. So taking that time to be reminded about who God is and what he says about himself as love and what that looks like for me just gave me sort of like a new spring in my step. So the thing that kind of emerged on my page as I was just being creative, and that's why I encourage you to use whatever you got. Use your markers, use your pens, use your washi tape, use your stickers. And when I did that, I added some glitter because I love this idea of where the pixie dust settles, this idea of sort of the fairy dust that gives us a little light and life. So I added that, but what came out of it for me is I put the world across right here. Okay, the world washi tape is sort of in the middle. And then I put Lord, and then this down here says my thoughts. And I really, as what emerged out of this whole thing for me was that I think I have more control over the world than I really do. And when I submit to God's love, and I put Lord here, like trusting him to take care of the world, when I sit in that space, as a human, I am so much better balanced. I'm taking responsibility for the things that only are mine. And looking at this and thinking about that being like the world across my brain, it's not my job. But my job was to get up this morning, take care of my dog so my husband could go to an early work meeting, get my paperwork done, make breakfast for my kids, go to my job, come home tonight and spend some time with my church community. Those are the things that are in my sphere of influence and in my world. And I think often, I think that I'm God. I hate saying that out loud. But I do. I get myself and my own power confused with the almighty power of God. So that's my challenge for this week, is to just really pay attention to where I get my priorities and I put myself above God. And remember the Shema, to love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, all your mind, all your strength, and to love your neighbor as yourself.